What up? What up? What up? It's your man Sean P coming in live. This is Sean P Experience. I have another amazing guest lined up. It'll be an exciting interview. I've been waiting for this for so long. Can't wait to have it. How you doing this afternoon, my sister?
I'm doing so well. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to it too.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna do your official introduction for those that don't know, live under a rock. I have Miss Anna Malaika Tubbs, the New York Times bestselling author, multidisciplinary expert on race, gender, and equity, with degrees from Stanford and Cambridge. Her debut book, The Three Mothers, explores how the mothers of uh, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin shaped a nation. Honors and recognition, only a few of them because she got a long list. New York Times bestseller, Amazon editor's pick, named one of Amazon's best biographies and memoirs of 2021. One of the Skill's 16 essential books to read this Black History Month. One of Fortune magazine's 21 books to look forward to in 2021.
Thank you
Here we
so
are.
much. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So this show is called Sitting with Griot, paying homage to the ancient storytellers and things of that nature, writers, everything else. How do you feel about being a modern day griot or grioti for the ladies? And do you feel any pressure carrying that moniker?
It's a legacy that I'm so honored to continue. Spent so much of my life just reading these incredible works by Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde. And so I just feel honored that I get to just write at any time that my books appear on a list with any of those names. I have to pinch myself and remind myself that that's real. And I'm really just honored that I get to do that. And I think especially right now where a lot of people are feeling really scared and just confused about what's happening on a national level, writers are more important than ever. And especially those of us who see our writing as part of truth telling and accurate record keeping and making sure that everybody has access to what they need to not only survive, but keep hope alive and remind them of where we've come from and just, yeah, who we are a part of. And it just feels like I get to play a really unique role at a time like this.
So I just thought about something right before coming on the air. This book came out like 2021,
Yeah.
still pandemic time. So
Yes.
whenever I have an author that had a book around that time, were you writing this book like during the pandemic or any part of the process in the pandemic?
I started writing it in 2018. I started writing it, and then I was pretty much done with it before the pandemic started, but there were so many things that I went back and added and edited before it came out in February 2021. So, for example, when I started writing the book, George Floyd was alive. We didn't know his name on a national level. And I had already finished the book and the full draft of the book, but it was really important to me to go back and make sure I included him in this book because he was calling out for mama. And this book, The Three Mothers, is all about the power of Black motherhood and the ways in which Black mothers have not only, reclaimed their own lives and made sure that their humanity was respected and acknowledged, but especially that the humanity of our children would be. And so I wanted to make sure readers knew that when they were walking through this history that I was going through in The Three Mothers, that they also understood how relevant it was to everything we were still experiencing. And so the first words that you see in The Three Mothers are George Floyd's last words.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, for sure. In your acknowledgement section, you mentioned your son being a companion during your writing and research process. What has the impact of motherhood been on your personal scholarship and your creativity and your approach to storytelling?
Such a good question. I started writing the book before I was a mother. I've always really honored mothers and their role. And I had an incredible mother myself, and she advocated for women's rights in the US as well as abroad. And so we my siblings and I traveled from country to country growing up with her work. And she always told us to pay attention to the way mothers were being treated in each of the places that we lived. And she believed that basically everything could relate back to the treatment of mothers in any given society. If mothers were taken care of, if mothers were supported, then you would see ripple effects that had a positive ripple effect on that entire society. And that the opposite was also true. If mothers were not being taken care of, if mothers were not being supported, that you would also see these kind of cycles of inequity. And so she believed that in the US, we did not support mothers enough. But I grew up thinking, wow, this role of mothering, not only in the home for their children, but on a societal level, is so powerful, is so influential. And it's why I wanted to honor it even before I became a mom. And then as I was writing The Three Mothers, I was expecting our first. And it took on a very personal meaning for me to be writing this book. And I talk about at the beginning how as immediately as I found out that I was expecting, I was excited, but then I was also very afraid because I was well aware of how dangerous it was to become a mom in the United States, let alone a Black mother, and all of the attacks that were continuously waged against us and our children. And so it felt like these three women who I was writing about and uncovering their life stories were kind of guiding me through my mothering journey. And I say it all the time, but my mothering of my children, now I have three. At the time I only had my eldest. And so I thanked him in the acknowledgement section because I was pregnant with him while I was writing the book. But I can't separate my mothering from the book. It is completely intertwined. Everything that I learned and all of the strategies that these three women used in their own mothering, I have taken into my mothering as well. So I'm really grateful. I think it's given me such a different overview of mothering and also a perspective about, again, the power of mothering, how I deserve to be honored and thanked, and that our children and us are doing this liberatory work together. This is about introducing new worlds and transforming, the things in our society that need transforming. And when you see mothering as a steward of that new world, you realize how important and how influential it is.
So how do you imagine the book being different had you not been a mother? And you were just doing the research and just studying, I don't want to say we're hypothesizing, but if you're not a mother yourself,
Yeah.
how'd it be different?
That's such a good question. I would say, I think it just wouldn't have had quite as much of a personal kind of tone to it because both my books, The Three Mothers and Erased, that one just came out in May. So there's, thank you, a direct connection between The Three Mothers and Erased. In both of them, I am really writing a little bit of a memoir and I'm sharing my own experiences. And so I think The Three Mothers, if I hadn't had my son in the process of this book, getting, me writing it and creating it, I think I would have just had a little bit more of a guessing happening of maybe this is how the mothers felt, or maybe this is what they were experiencing. But I was able to root it even deeper in my own experiences. So I think it brought a more emotional tone to the work, a more urgent tone as well, because I'm writing about some really painful things in American history and some really horrific things, as well as some beautiful and brilliant things. But that duality of what it means to be a Black woman and a Black mother in the United States, I think I was able to center it even more as a Black mother. But I also think that you don't have to be a Black mother to honor Black mothers. So I think the work still would have been wonderful and still would have been important. I just think the tone might have been a little different.
So you are a well-trained scholar for sure. I want to talk about the emotion part a little bit more and tease it out because having this show, talking to a lot of PhDs, I know it's sometimes in academic kind of scholarship, they almost speak about having to almost learn how to write all over again because the school Want it to be more like take the emotion out of it, keep it just stats and facts. And there's a bad name on nonfiction because of that. Some
Yeah.
folks where they can't stand nonfiction because it's just that numbers and names.
Yeah.
Talk about the need for the emotion in the writing.
So important. And I'm a proud nerd. I really am. I love school and I love research and I love that I was able to spend so many years getting these degrees. But I've always kind of come into conflict with the academic way of doing things, which is often, you use a lot of jargon, you kind of hide behind that. There's all these words that are completely unnecessary, and a lot of people can't understand what you're saying. And sometimes it's by design. A lot of academics want to have that air of, I studied this for many years and I'm an expert, and not everybody can do what I do, and not everybody can understand it because you're not in the same discipline that I'm in, etc. That for me has never been inspiring, nor why I wanted to write. And so I've had advisors and professors tell me in the past that my work was, quote, too understandable, and that I needed to
Oh my
try
God,
less understood.
that's crazy.
Yes, it is crazy. And I would always ask, is that going to keep me from getting the grade that I deserve? Is that going to keep me from getting the degree? And they'd say no, but maybe you want to try to be more academic and all of this. And I said, it's not whether or not I'm academic. I'm smart. I don't need to perform it. And I really want to make sure that anybody can access my work and anybody can find usefulness in it, because if only a few people can understand what I have to say, why would I be proud of that? I am so much more proud of anybody being able to pick up this book. Not only do they understand it, but they'll also go, like you said, on an emotional journey with it. And for me, when I was talking about all these women writers who I was so incredibly inspired by throughout my life, all of them were writing for our survival, for us to live, for us to find joy, for us to know our histories and know what legacies we were carrying with us. They were not writing so that a committee of academics could give them a stamp of approval. And so it's not what I'm interested in either. And I really, really love hearing from people who say, wow, your books read like a novel. Like I felt like I was really getting to know the people behind your research. And I actually think that that's what leads to more movement and more change, when people feel like they are connecting to the people in your work and connecting to you as an author. That's also why I have that personal kind of memoir style in my work, because I'm inviting my readers to be vulnerable as well and to really go on the journey with me. So yes, I'm always grateful when people notice that aspect of my work. And especially because they know I have a PhD. Some people might think, oh, this is going to be academic. I've had bad experience with academic books in the past, right? And so I was very intentional about making sure that my work is accessible. That's a harder thing to do, to be honest, than to hide behind overly academic language.
I've always said in different book clubs when I'm reading a book like that, like, wait a minute. So this person pretty much is writing to other PhDs, not to a person like us. They're
Right.
writing to their fellow, that's crazy.
Yeah. And it's not only their fellow PhDs, it's also like, for me, I want somebody who has a PhD in CS to also be able to read my work, right? And there's a lot of people who would write just for like their PhD in sociology, and there'd be other people who have just as many degrees and wouldn't be able to understand them because they're situating themselves just in, this tiny box. And so for me, when I think about accessible language, it's not about dumbing it down. It's not, everybody is intelligent. Everybody has their own experiences to bring to the table and then their interpretations. High school students are brilliant, right? They should be able to access the language. So I'm not going to do anything that keeps people from accessing it. And I also don't want to speak about it in a way where I'm saying, oh, I'm making it, dumb for people. That's not it at all. It's still is really important and intelligent conversation that I believe we are all capable of having.
Let me ask you this question. There are so many amazing heroes we've had in history. How did you narrow down to like these specific three ladies?
Yeah,
Give me the why.
such a good question. So when I started my PhD, I was really inspired by Margot Lee Shetterly's book called Hidden Figures, and it went on to become that incredible film. But the original book was written by Margot Lee Shetterly, and I was inspired because I was really angry that that was the first time I was hearing these women's names, and the strategy of erasing them became very clear, right? How did we not know that Black women were the mathematicians behind NASA? And that becomes obvious, right? This was kept from us on purpose. This wasn't a mistake. This was by design. So we didn't know about, again, another legacy that we might be continuing. And I just decided I'm going to be somebody who writes about their hidden figures, because the way in which her work shifted my understanding of national history, world history, and I thought about how it could have even supported me even more when I was a teenager to know these things. I wanted to make sure I became somebody who did the same kind of mind shifting work by providing accurate records of American history. And so I knew I was going to find hidden figures. I wanted to pair that with what I spoke about a little bit before, my honoring of mothers and how important their role is in society. And so I knew it was going to be Black women who were mothers. Obviously, this left a lot of options open. But then I thought, how can I bring the most people to my work? How can I have the largest audience? Because whenever I'm writing something, I'm also always thinking about connecting with as many people as possible. I'm not somebody who is sort of like, if 10 people pick it up, I'm happy just to be writing. That's not motivating for me. I'm thinking, how do we get this in front of as many people as we can? Because I want more people to understand each other and understand themselves. And I think it's an important role that, like I said before, writers play in connecting people. And so I thought, okay, who are some of the most famous men? How might I be able to use patriarchy sort of as a hook, really, like getting some people to pick up the book because they care about the men? And I know some people come to the book because they really do want to hear about the moms, but a lot of people come to the book because they really want to hear about these sons and from this new perspective. And so either way, you're going to walk away knowing about three Black women's stories. No matter why you came to begin with, you're going to walk away knowing about them. And so I thought, of course, I'm going to go with MLK Jr. That felt like a natural first pick. Then, of course, because Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. are always put in conversation with each other, I thought, okay, I'm definitely going to choose Malcolm X. But I also knew that I wasn't going to go with just two, because when you only have two people or two variables in anything, the human brain starts to decide that they're opposites of each other. You start to say things like, oh, MLK Jr. was the peaceful one and Malcolm X was not. Clearly, that is not an accurate description of either of these men. But when you introduce a third, you then start to see a spectrum of reality. And it's no longer that they're on opposite sides of each other. So I knew it wasn't going to be two, and I was going to do three women. And the reason I chose James Baldwin and his mother, Bertis Baldwin, I watched I Am Not Your Negro. I believe it was on Netflix at the time. I can't really remember, but I watched it. And in that, James Baldwin talks about how he was a witness to the life of his friends. So he talks about three friends. He talks about Martin, Malcolm, and Medgar. And I thought, okay, this could be really powerful if where the third person is a mother who has a Black and queer son who stood up against so many different forms of discrimination, and who saw himself as a witness, as the writer who was keeping their records alive. It just felt like a beautiful third person to add. And so when I looked those three women up, there was very little out there about them, almost nothing out there about them. But I could find some estimates on when they were born, some estimates on when they passed away. And I knew when their famous sons were born. So I say all this because all three of them were born within 6 years of each other. And then they all had sons within 5 years of each other. And then two of them lived until the 1990s. And so their lives were happening simultaneously. All of these incredible milestones were happening, even though the three of them never met each other. And so I could write about their lives simultaneously. And it just felt like I had made my way into this incredible story about three women who never met, but who were intertwined with each other.
I am so glad I asked that one question. Like, so much of this makes so much more sense, that one question. And you're right, you were brilliant because I'm an incredible Malcolm X fan. Like, I love him more than anybody. I have a
Mm,
literal shelf that's just Malcolm.
I love
So when
that.
I first saw this, I was going to hop on it. Like, immediately, I see that name, I'm getting it. I don't care what it is. So your idea definitely worked on me.
I worked on
That
you
was
there.
the thing.
Gotcha. I love that.
Gotcha. That's good. That's good. That's good. But you said something important. It's almost a segue. I've interviewed several artists who've written about remarkable Black women, and oftentimes they mention how hard it is to find information about them. So, what was your research process like? And why do you think it's so common that we can't find
Mm,
documents and records? And it just, you see it time and time again.
yes. Yeah. I like to talk about it as if all of our lives and our stories, each of us, the record of our lives is like a puzzle. And there are some lives where those puzzle pieces are put together, they are taken care of, they are framed. You know, maybe you put them on a wall and you tell people not to touch it. It's that important that we keep that record alive. And then there's other lives where we let the pieces scatter. Some of them get lost, some of them get thrown away, some of them, I don't know, the dog chews on them. Like, we just don't care about those ones. And the reason that happens is more what I explain in my second book, which is patriarchy in the US, but particularly how patriarchy not only hurts Black men, but it especially pushes out Black women. And so we don't value the lives of Black women. We don't see them as the puzzle that we need to conserve and frame. And so when you're doing research on that kind of life that wasn't protected, that wasn't framed, that those pieces were not kept together and the pieces were allowed to scatter and be thrown away, you have to do some really intense work, because you're not going to be able to find them online. If you find anything, it's just one piece and it's missing the context around it. And it's also, the context has been interpreted by people who are not Black women themselves. And so they've missed a lot of the details as well, or they just haven't cared to inquire more. So an example of that, when I looked up these three women initially, for Louise Little, Malcolm X's mother, all I could find really was that she had gone crazy, quote unquote, and that this is how her kids had been separated from her. But in my research, I was able to contact an academic who was an expert in Malcolm X, and I asked him for any archives he had on Louise, and he sent me these photocopied archives. He had so many incredible things, and one of them was a note that a white male doctor had written about Louise Little when he was sent to evaluate her. And it said, and this is a quote, that she was imagining being discriminated against. This was the diagnosis. And so she was diagnosed with dementia, and she was put in a mental institution against her will for 25 years of her life. And all of her children were taken from her and placed into different foster homes. So that's just an example of, there was a piece of information out there, but it was clearly misinterpreted. It was derogatory to even use words like crazy or she had lost her mind. And it needed somebody who was going to go looking for those other pieces of the puzzle, and who was going to see her humanity enough to question that limited story before that. And it's one of the reasons I say why there needs to be more researchers, right, who look like us, who care about these stories, who believe that these stories deserve to be framed. And so with the three mothers, my original cover for the book, and I have it here, I'll show you. This is what the hardcover looks like. So I wanted to have each of the women framed as a response to that lack before of keeping their stories together. And so it was symbolic for me that they would be on the cover and be in these beautiful gold frames as if we'd seen them in a museum and honored them that way.
I love to ask this question after the research question. Know that everything can't make it into the book for various reasons. What's something that's not in the book that you wish could have made it into the book?
That's such a good question, and it gives me an opportunity to fully answer the research question from before. There was, like I said, so little out there about them. So I had to figure out, okay, how do I piece these stories together? I had these timelines in my office where I had just these like big poster boards, and I was pinning things and facts on there. So again, I knew sort of when they were born. I knew when the famous son was born, and I knew around when they'd passed away. But in between that, there wasn't a lot of information. So my first step was, okay, let me think about the sons. Anything that the sons wrote or any speech that they gave, I'm going to deeply analyze and see if there's anything they tell me about their mothers. There were some things that the sons had to say about their mothers, so I could then pull that information and put it on my timeline. Then from there, I moved to the experts in the sons' lives. So if these authors were still alive, I reached out to them and said, I'm a PhD student at the time. I need any information you might have on these mothers. And many of them replied. I took that and I would put it, into the timeline. Then I moved on to anything their loved ones had to say. So I interviewed any loved ones who were willing to speak with me. So any children they had still, or grandchildren. And I mean, this is very recent history, so a lot of their loved ones are alive. And asked them what they had to say and added those pieces of information in. And then I also was contacting local historians and all of the places where the women lived, who were helping me find land deeds and birth certificates and death certificates. All of these things I was putting into the timeline. And truly, because I was really like savoring every single morsel of information I could find, it all ends up in the book because there was not a lot to begin with. And I think there's still so much out there to uncover about these three women. And I hope my book is not the only one that dives even deeper into their lives. Louise Little's family has put out a book as well that you can get online and dives even deeper into Louise's story than I could, right? Because that's her family. And so when we're thinking about how each of the sons have multiple books written about them, I believe these mothers deserve that as well. And so for my book, because I was one of the first people to research these three women, I had to include everything that I could find, because every paragraph you see in the book required like 5 different sources just to write that part of the story. And so I didn't have like the privilege of picking and choosing what wasn't going to go in the book. The only time I had to think about, okay, maybe I don't include that, or I say some kind of caveat around it, was if people disagreed with each other. Because if you think about in your own life, if I were to come to you and say, hey, I want to write about your mother or your father, and then I say to your cousins, or if you have siblings, and I say, okay, well, what did you think about this person, or how did that situation go, or what happened? You all might give me completely different stories, right? Who's to say what is the truth? And so I, at times, had to kind of say, hey, this is something that this person said, and this is something that somebody else said. In Malcolm X's life, since you're such a fan, I'll give you an example. We had been told for a long time that his mother was the product, and this is a trigger warning, a product of rape. That this is what a lot of people have said, that she had lighter skin because her mother had experienced this sexual assault. But then when I was doing my research, I received a phone call from one of the daughters, one of Malcolm and Betty's daughters, which was such an incredible honor. But she was telling me her version of the story. And she said, that never happened. When my dad was speaking about having, this is the quote that it comes from, like the rapist's blood within me. Malcolm says that kind of famously, that he hates the rapist's blood within him. That she says historians and scholars just took that quote and assumed that that's what was happening, when he was actually just saying it more metaphorically because there was white blood within him. And so that's an example of like, okay, all of the books and the researchers are telling me that this sexual assault happened, but the family is telling me that that's not what happened. So when I write it in the book, you'll see that I don't say that Louise was a product of this sexual assault, but instead I say there are these assaults that happen against Black women throughout American history. So I can still speak about that history without claiming that it happened to her. So that's kind of a complicated way of answering it, but it does illustrate how historians, we have to identify when we don't know what actually did or did not happen. And I signal that a lot in the book. And if you are reading a history book where people don't signal that, you should be kind of questioning that, because history is not objective. And so it's actually, in my opinion, important that historians make it very clear when they're taking a guess at something.
That's a real good example, because a few weeks ago I had a doctor on the show. He has this brand new book about Hubert Henry Harrison, which is very major in the Malcolm X lineage, right? And just talking about like when you decide to not put something in the book for various reasons, why you might say, you know what, I don't want to really put this out there for whatever the reason. That's another good example of having to make those choices, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And writing any history, you do have to make a lot of those choices. And people ask me a lot, once they read The Three Mothers, they want to write something about maybe their own mothers or grandmothers in their lives and getting those histories. And I think it's so important that we do more and more of these books, and that we're aware of the role we're playing as researchers, that we are not the holders of truth, and nobody is, actually. Like, objective truth is actually very hard to find. And so we can still write those histories. We just have to make sure we're being careful about how we're representing the story, so that you don't say this is 100% true. And I mean, who's to say? We can give our most informed guess. We can say various different sources confirmed this for me, right? That's how we get as close as possible to the truth.
So we're not trained historians, and some of us are not authors. Could we do it as our own family archivists? I know in my family, my mom has taken that mantle. She has all these things. She
Yeah.
saves every picture, everything. Like, she is the person. We
Wow.
got technology now. We got all kind of devices now. What could we actively do to keep our families' history?
It's so important that we do this. It's really, really important. And yes, no matter if we're trained historians or not, it is essential for us to keep record of our family stories. And especially like any of the stories that are, like I said earlier, that metaphor of a puzzle piece that people are trying to scatter, that is strategic, right? That scattering of certain lives, and that that inability to honor those lives is very strategic, so that we can't access that all important information and apply it to our lives and our struggle right now. We need to know, how have we done this? How have our people not only survived, but still found joy, still found creativity, still lived wonderful lives in the face of many people who were trying to deny that and rob them of that. And so, yes, the way we can do that, it's just a step-by-step kind of process. If the person who you want to honor is still alive, interview them, get record of them speaking, so you can hear them, get a video of them, ask them, how did you do it? Ask them, especially for mothers, this is a really important question. What were your dreams? What were your aspirations? What did you want to do? Did you get to do those things? It's never too late to help them do those things, because so many mothers, especially Black mothers, have been told, sacrifice yourself. The more you sacrifice yourself, the better a mother you are. And they've also been told, be humble. Don't take credit for things. Stay in the background. That's honorable. And I see that as a strategy of keeping mothers from their due recognition. And I see it as a form of erasure. And so I really want us to shift away from that and instead really focus in on, mom, grandma, what did you want to do? And did you get to do that? And how did your passions influence what you taught me? And you'll start to see these really beautiful connections, even if they didn't make it obvious to you to begin with. For instance, with these 3 women that I researched in my book, James Baldwin was a writer, and she wanted to gift people her writing, and she wanted to help them understand how to make it through the dark times in their lives and how to make it past pain. And so all of the people in her life would look forward to these letters that she would write them for their birthdays. This was an incredible gift that she had. So did James Baldwin know that his mother was a writer? I'm not sure. But we know that he inherited this from her, right? Now that I've put my book out there, you see that connection. So there's probably a lot of connections in your own lives with the people who raised you, and who they were before you were even a thought in their mind. And it's really cool to see how connected we are to those legacies.
Yeah, my grandfather passed at the end of last year, but the last 2 years of his life, he was blind toward the end. But I would take my phone on a recording setting, and I just took the phone down and just rattle off questions.
Oh,
He
beautiful.
was still so sharp, even toward the end. So like, I just asked him a question, he would
Yeah,
just go. He would
that's
just
so
go and just
beautiful.
kept recording it. I haven't played them yet. I haven't had the heart to play them yet, but I have them. So, you know.
That's the thing, that's so beautiful that you shared that. You might not be ready immediately to do something with it, right? But you have it for when you want to go back to it. And there's so many of us who don't have any record. We didn't ask the questions, right? And so if that's the case, like the person has passed away and you still want to honor them, the next stage of that is interviewing people who knew them is really important. Asking for all these different kind of interpretations of who this person was in their own lives. The record keeping, like you said, of pictures that your mom keeps, that is very helpful, especially for visibility. There is, again, when I talk about erasure, visibility is the way that you fight that. And so keeping those pictures, like when I showed you the cover of the book, finding those pictures was really difficult. There were no pictures out there of Louise, and Bertus especially were really hard to find. And so keeping more pictures, taking more pictures, organizing those pictures is really important. And then you can also do research on the context. So if, for instance, with my book, if I didn't know exactly what was happening for them during a specific year of their lives, it was still really important for me to know what was happening in the city that they lived in during that particular year. So going and looking up newspaper articles from that particular day and year and time, then I understood, oh, wow, this person, let's say, for instance, like the Oprah Winfrey show came out when they were at this age, right? That's important to know. That's going to impact their lives. And so you can fill in some of the blanks with that larger context. And sometimes you're kind of taking a guess, but you can say, I believe this would have impacted my mom or my grandma or my grandpa, however it is that you want to do it. And then also thinking about, for instance, the world wars that the 3 women experienced that I wrote about. Were their brothers drafted? Were their husbands drafted? All of these things were really important. So that's how you can kind of take the steps towards still doing something like this, even if the person you want to honor and know has passed away.
I have a wonderful question from the guests. I love whenever we get our live questions. This is Dr. Ashley Wade, one of my fellow writers, my sister. Did anything supernatural happen to you during the process of writing this book that
Mm,
confirmed you were in alignment with this process?
ooh, that's a beautiful question. Did anything supernatural happen? For me, there were all these moments where I was writing about something, let's say, very difficult, right? When I was talking about some of that context about the time, I really wanted to go deep into what these women endured and what their contemporaries endured and what could have happened to them, right? And so we know they were born in the early 1900s, so they're experiencing Jim Crow. They're seeing some of the most horrific things in their lives constantly. And there were times where I would feel very like, oh, this is really difficult for me to do. And quite often in those moments was when I would feel my son kick inside of me. And it felt like this moment of, this is what I'm doing this for. Like, I have to continue this work. And as hard as it is to do, me creating this record is not only for me, it's not only for these three mothers, it's also for my child, it's also for our descendants. And so it felt like those were moments that just really like how could my baby know what I was doing, and they would just always come right at the right time. So for me, that always feels supernatural, because I feel like, babies are these like new spirits that are, inhabiting their mother's body. And there is such a connection to, in my opinion, our ancestors. And so I think a lot about that. And I also felt, and I don't know if this counts as supernatural, but it really felt like anytime I was worried about mothering or something, coming up in my pregnancy or whatever, that in my research I was doing for that day, like these three women were giving me lessons and kind of guiding me through some of those worries. And so those ones maybe was just, I read the right thing that day that I needed to hear and I needed to pick up on. So it was kind of on both ends. Sometimes the research would be difficult for me, and then my pregnancy would help me with the research. And then sometimes maybe something was happening with my pregnancy and my research would help me through that. So there were all of these really cool connections happening.
Okay, okay. So I want to ask you about this. So I have this book in three formats: paperback, Kindle, and audio, which is, I
I
know it
love
sounds crazy. But you did your own audio narration.
it.
So
Yes.
whenever an author does that, I love to ask the authors, like, what was your narration process like? Like going into the booth, the
Yeah.
recording, like, was it more difficult than what you anticipated, or was it not? Like, give us the insight on that.
Such a great question. I actually had to audition to record my own audiobook because it's not, as much as there are some memoir elements, it's not a full memoir, right? And so I think my publisher was wanting to bring in a voice actress who could, really bring it to life. And they were thinking of Tessa Thompson and like these like cool, amazing people. But I really wanted to do it. Like, I just felt like I want to read this book. And so I had to submit an audition tape to be considered alongside the other voice actresses. So now I am an official voice actress because I did both my books now, but thank you. They said, yeah, you can do it. And you have, you actually are quite good at this. And so I said, great, awesome. I'm looking forward to doing this. And then I realized why people are like professional voice actors, because it's a lot of work. It was exhausting. And I was pregnant with my son when I was recording it. So I was in the booth, from like 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. every day for a full week, which may not sound crazy because like that's our normal working hours. But when you're just like speaking nonstop for that long, it's pretty exhausting. And it made me really appreciate, voice actors. And then I was so grateful because the audio version gets such good ratings. People really love my performance there. So I now feel confident that, any future books, I will be the author, or I will be the narrator. And I agree, when I'm listening to books, if it's read by somebody who isn't the author, it just doesn't feel like, I'm just not getting the same experience out of it. I don't know. It just doesn't quite line up for me, especially if it's nonfiction.
So for all my writers watching the show, as you were reading the book aloud, did you like see something where it's like, man, why did I say it like this? Or I wish I could have changed that. Like, was it different when you read it?
Yeah, so my editing process for any writing that I do, I always read my work out loud. So anything that I'm going to submit, whether it's an op-ed, or when I was doing my theses in undergrad and in my graduate work, I read that whole document, whether it's this like small document or this really large document, out loud. I like stand at my standing desk, and it's almost as if I'm giving a speech to like a pretend audience. That's how I edit. And so even before I got into the audiobook session, I knew what my book sounded like, because that's always what I'm thinking of. Like, how does this sound to an audience? And I think if you just read it without hearing yourself say it, you miss some things, and you don't quite get the energy you're going for, or you don't quite get the tone you're going for. So I read my books out loud, and I do so over and over again with every edit round, because there's about 3 editing rounds. I'm reading it out loud. So it takes a long time, but it's worth it. Like, this is the thing you're putting out into the world for, even beyond your own life. It's got to be perfect. And that's how I do it. But I will say, there are a lot of words that I thought I knew how to pronounce. And then when you're recording it in the session and your voice coach is there listening, there were multiple times where I was stopped and they were like, what are you saying? One example was posthumously. Because I'm talking about women who have passed, I obviously am saying posthumously a lot. I thought it was posthumously. I thought that's how you said the word. And so I'm, doing my reading, doing my little performance, because I add a lot of like emotion into my reading. And I said posthumously, something like that. And they were like, that's not the word, Dr. Tubbs. And I was like, really? Are you sure? I say it all the time. And they were like, yep, that's not how you say it. So it's always fun, because you realize if you write a word a lot, you might not actually know how that word is pronounced.
Thank you very much for that. So one thing I noticed about all 3 of these ladies at this time, they were big on being involved in the churches, the women clubs, educational groups, civic organizations. During
Yep.
that era, why do you think it was so important to belong in multiple groups? And that was like so vital for their sense of community.
Yeah.
What was that about?
It was critical, because throughout American history, you see, again, all these attacks on the humanity of Black people. You see the robbing of our rights. You see restrictions against us. There's so many attacks that we're all well aware of. But one of the ways in which we responded to those attacks historically was to create our own nations, really, within a nation. And so the Black church, for example, was a nation within a nation, where that was the place where many people could find support, where many people found community, where our most powerful orators practiced their skill within the Black church, where people were giving each other food and housing and healthcare. So all of these mini groups are operating as the alternative to what they're seeing on a national level. And so it's not a coincidence that all 3 of these women and their husbands were involved in the Black church. All of the husbands were ministers, and that's not a coincidence. It was that is where Black people, Black men, Black women could find experiences of humanity and being able to live and be protected and find support and find community. And it is just a testament to what we have to continue to engage in, especially right now. Again, when we understand how our people have resisted, we see that there are clear tactics and strategies of that resistance. And community and organizing in those communities together and keeping each other informed and educated. And even, for instance, obviously it was illegal for many years for Black people to be educated, to even read and write. The way in which Black people found ways to be educated were within these community groups outside of formal experiences of education. And so even right now, this is Banned Book Week, for example, a lot of people are asking, so how do we still get books to people if we're not allowed to have them in our public schools and we're not allowed to have them in our libraries? And I say, historically, for many years, Black people weren't even allowed to enter schools or public libraries, and we still found ways. So this is when community groups become that much more important, because can we have book clubs in these community groups? Can we, as authors, which I always do, I donate copies of my books to community groups, to schools, to organizations, and I raise money from friends and supporters to get some free copies out into the world so that people can access them without barriers. That becomes incredibly important. And so those community groups showed a model of how do you remove barriers that our nation is placing? How do we create spaces where those barriers are removed?
Yes, ma'am. Whenever I interviewed Dr. Imani Perry a couple years ago about her book, May Forever We Stand, I couldn't believe just how many groups they had back then. Like, we talk about thousands of organizations.
Yeah.
We always hear about the Divine Nine, of course, and
Yeah.
some other but they had like hundreds and thousands of groups back then. It was just so amazing to me, the number that they
Yeah.
had.
Yeah. And how necessary that is. And I mean, we probably still have a lot of groups that are not getting the recognition that they deserve and not as much attention as they deserve. But yeah, I wonder if there is a need to return to more of that model.
In the book, you mentioned the backlash that Serena Williams faced in tennis via the media and her opponents and everything like that. About a month or so ago, we saw the tennis extraordinaire Taylor Townsend experience some public disrespect. So talk about like the ongoing assault on Black women in sports and pop culture today,
Yeah.
and what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. So in the book, because I'm moving from like one decade to another, and because all of the mothers were born within these years of each other and they have their famous sons, and I talked about this earlier, how their lives were happening simultaneously, I'm going through a decade of American history by using their lives as a guiding point. And so we go from the early 1900s all the way to the 1990s when they pass away. And then, and Alberta King passed away in the 1970s because she was killed, but we can get into that if we want to. But the other two live until the 1990s. And I use my concluding chapter to explain how everything we've learned about their lives is relevant to us today, that there are all of these connections to what we see in the struggles that they face and what they have to push up against constantly and all of these dehumanizing attacks, how there's still that present in all that we do, even if we've come very far, even if we are celebrities, even if we are national icons, how the ways in which we are dehumanized have continued. And so Serena Williams constantly being compared to animals, even in caricatures that people drew of her. And honestly, I think have contributed to a lot of like the current discussion around Serena and why, for instance, she's taking weight loss supplement or drugs, right? This is something we have to remember. She was attacked constantly in the media because of her body. And there are real effects of that. Our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama, was constantly attacked for how she looked, and all of these different sources trying to push her out of a definition of womanhood even, and what it meant to be human. Like all of these representations are very strategic as a way of continuing the dehumanization of Black women. And it's just important that we're aware of that, because it doesn't define us and it doesn't limit us, but we are coming up against it in everything that we do, in our jobs, in the media, in how we're represented in film and TV. We have to continue to push against that and not let our guard down, because we haven't come as far as a lot of people think we have.
Another writer friend in the comments, writing by Winifred, says she bought the book. I can't remember the name of the book. It's the book that she bought to record her mom life experiences outside of motherhood. I've
Beautiful.
heard of that. I need that book myself, by the way, Winifred.
That's so beautiful.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So before we get out of here, I want to definitely ask you this question. I came across your TED talk, right? And one of my big dreams of my life is to be on that TED stage one day. Oh my God.
Yes.
So what are some suggestions or tips you have for anybody out there watching us public speaking when it comes to like the preparation for the TED talk?
Well, I'm so excited for your future TED Talk. I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be amazing. I want to know what it's going to be about, so I'll ask you that after I answer your question. You know, I've been actually getting this question a lot lately around nervousness that people feel when they're going to do something, you know, really big and have a big opportunity that they've wanted for so long. And then you feel so much pressure because you're like, I wanted this. And so one of the things is that I have a bit of a mantra that I tell myself, which is, this is an opportunity you wanted and that you asked for. And now you simply have to receive it. So it's not the pressure of like, you need to be perfect and like, don't mess this up because you've wanted this for so long, but more so, you are ready for this. You are prepared for this. You have everything you need to do this. So now just receive it, receive the opportunity and show them what you can do. And so that's one of the things that I tell myself anytime I speak. I used to get really nervous for things and my heart would beat really fast and I'd get all like clammy and I just didn't know what was going on. So I had to find these ways to just center myself, remind myself of who I am and what I know. And no matter what that person asks me, I'm going to be ready. And if it's a speech like a TED Talk where everything is memorized, that I could do it and that it was an opportunity that I'd always wanted. So I wasn't going to be the one who stood in my way of that. Funny fact, I mean, I don't know if it's funny, but it is a fact. When I did my TED Talk, I had just given birth to my daughter about 12 weeks before then. And so for any listeners who have had children, you know that is a difficult thing to do. You know, moms, the way our brains work is still so brilliant. Like, I'm not somebody who will ever say that mom brain is dumb. It's just that the way in which our brains have reprioritized themselves, we're thinking of how we're keeping another human thriving and alive, right? Like, that's very brilliant. It's not the brain that is thinking, how do I remember this memorized speech? And you don't have teleprompters for TED. Like, everything you see on a TED stage is memorized. And so I had to go and do a 15-minute memorized speech when I had pretty recently given birth and was more so thinking about my baby daughter as well as my 2-year-old son. But I remember saying to myself, like, this is something you've always wanted. So you can do this and just go ahead and receive the opportunity. And then you can get back to your baby right after those 15 minutes. And so, yeah, that's my advice. And the last thing I'll say is I was a teacher for many years. And so that also helps a lot with public speaking because kids, I taught 8th graders through 12th graders, and they were my best teachers, and they will tell you if something is horrible. Like, they'll tell you if something's boring, you know, they'll yawn, they'll like walk out the door, they'll fall asleep. Like, they don't care. Adults will give you like applause no matter what you do. And so they're not really good judges to get you prepared to be a good speaker, to be honest. Like, my students are the reason I'm an engaging speaker, and that if I give a talk, it's going to be a good one, because I didn't want them to fall asleep. I wanted them to pay attention. I wanted them to remember what I had to say. I wanted them to be excited to come to class. And I saw them as like the more important judges of my ability. And that has served me for many years after.
Thank you very much for that. So you did me an incredible solid being willing to come on talking about this book. And you have a brand new book on the market right now. Go out there and get it. I want you to take this last bit of time and tell us all about your brand new publication, Embrace.
Thank you. I have it right next to me. I'll show you all just so you can see it. This is erased. It says what American patriarchy has hidden from us. I'm really grateful because it became an instant New York Times bestseller, and I still can't believe it. I'm so, so thankful for that, for everyone who supported it. And I see it as really a growth out of the Three Mothers, because when people read the Three Mothers, they feel really shocked that we didn't already know that the sons were walking in their mother's footsteps, that these three moms, Alberta King, Berta Baldwin, and Louise Little, did everything that their sons became famous for before their sons were even a thought in their mind. And so everybody always asks me, how did they get erased? How did this happen? How did we not know these details about their lives? And I realized that it's because people don't understand that our founding fathers in the United States were wanting to build a republic for men, and white men, and particularly elitist white men. And so they wrote a constitution with that in mind. And they wanted to create a hierarchy where women did not matter and women could not participate politically, but where people who were enslaved at the time were not included, where indigenous people were not included, where poor white people were not included, where immigrants from that point forward were not included, and that was strategic. It was by design. It was not a mistake. It was not an accident. They did this all on purpose. And so if we don't know that, then we're really surprised by all the ways in which we're still experiencing that system to this day. And so Erased is about making it very clear what we are experiencing in the United States of America right now. And I smile about it because when you read it, you will no longer feel shocked. You will no longer feel surprised. You will feel like it's actually all very predictable. And I give you the playbook for how we resist right now. So the timing of it was crazy for it to come out in May of 2025. I couldn't have planned it better myself. But I want more people to read it because I think it will really help. It will help what we're going through right now.
Well, I know you're incredibly busy, a lot going on, but I would love to bring you back on the show to
I'd
talk
love to
about
do
erase.
that. Yeah,
Okay, we're gonna set that up. We're gonna set that up. I
absolutely.
almost made a big mistake. You almost got away. One
Okay.
of my major questions I have for all of my scholars lately
Yeah,
is how do you go about the exercise of reading?
of
How do
reading.
you read? Literally. Yeah.
I like that question. I now I have to read like at least 3 pages before I go to sleep every night, because otherwise my brain is just kind of too active and I can't calm down. So that's actually where I do most of my reading, especially like my reading that is for fun and not because I'm working or because I'm going to interview an author, or, there's a lot of other reading that I do because of my job. But I'm in bed, I'm rested, and I'm ready to just kind of end the day. And so that's how I end all my days, is with reading. But I also do a lot of audiobooks like you do, and listen to those, especially for the ones that I'm prepping for. I get the opportunity to interview a lot of amazing people, and it's usually around their books. And those ones I have on my audio book experiences, so that anytime I'm driving somewhere, I can also kind of work and prepare at the same time.
Do you have anything you listen to, like, I want to say relaxation or leisure? I know for a fact, even doing what I'm doing, I do a lot of reading for this show more than anything. It dominates my reading. So whenever
Yeah,
I'm in between podcasts, I'm like, great, I can go and read whatever I want. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? So
yeah.
what's that
I
like for you?
like fantasy books. I loved, for instance, the Children of Blood and Bone series. If you haven't started reading that, you got to get ready for the movies because they're coming out soon. But yeah, for me, it's like a little bit of an escape from reality. So right now, I'm reading The Covenant of Water, which came out, several years ago. But
Wait a minute. That book is like 800 pages, right?
it's very long. Now I'm going to be in this world for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you very, very much for coming on the show. Anybody watching this in the future, I got some great guests lined up. Look out for the flyers. Subscribe to the show. Like, share. And I'll see you guys next time on the Sean P Experience. Thank you.
Thank you.